Hey there farmers, Remy here with another trip down the Harvest Moon memory lane. And this time, we're setting our sights on Flowerbud Village. Magical Melody was released on the GameCube on November 10th, 2005 in North America. And it did not age nearly as well as its Wii successors, which I've already covered in previous videos by the way if y'all want to check those out later. There is a Wii version of Magical Melody that was released in 2008, but inexplicably you can only play as a male character in the Wii version. So for this review, I played the GameCube version, and all of my critiques going forward are exclusive to the GameCube entry of the game. Let's begin with the game's art style. Magical Melody's character designs were made by Igusa Matsuyama, the character designer for the majority of the series. The character designs themselves are exactly what you'd expect from a Harvest Moon game. They're very cute and colorful. Some of the characters look similar to characters from other games like Blue and Dan, and then others are directly exported from other games like Kurt and Dia from Save the Homeland. Because Matsuyama also designed these characters, they don't look out of place at all though. I like the character designs for the most part. They really go well with the cheerful and nonchalant atmosphere of the game. But that being said, I didn't really like the way that it was executed. It's not the first game in the series where the character designs leaned more into the chibi aesthetic, but the in-game models in this game in particular are somewhat controversial. You're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. And from what I've gathered on the interwebs, most people seem to be on the hate it side. The in-game models are a bit jarring. I know they were going for a more whimsical vibe compared to A Wonderful Life's more somber tone, but right off the bat, I wasn't a huge fan of it. And while it did eventually grow on me after countless hours of playing the game, I'm still really glad that they decided not to go this route with Tree of Tranquility later on. Personally, it feels really weird for my character to be pursuing romantic relationships and having a child, while looking like a child herself. All I'm saying is if there is a remake on the horizon for Magical Melody, then I really hope that they redesign the characters to look a bit more like the Grand Bazaar remakes, keeping the essence of the original design, while also making the characters look like actual adults. The game's look aside, Magical Melody was a breath of fresh air coming off the back of A Wonderful Life, which was pretty barren in terms of content. While there are a lot of things I didn't like about the gameplay, I appreciated the sheer amount of variety it offered in comparison to its predecessor. Let's get into it, shall we? Starting out the game, you're presented with 3 options for where you'd like to place your farm. Those that have played Tree of Tranquility will be familiar with this concept. However, unlike Tree of Tranquility where there's only minor differences between each plot of land, there's more of a strategic advantage in where you start out in Magical Melody. You are able to purchase the other plots of land in the game eventually, so in the grand scheme of things it doesn't really matter, but it does affect how long it takes you to be able to afford to purchase the other plots. The town location is convenient because that's where all the shops are, but the amount of space you actually get is pretty abysmal. What I didn't know starting out, because I'm allergic to actually reading the books in the game, is that you can actually grow crops on land even if you don't own it. By using the Z button, all the land in the game gets highlighted a different color, and all the blue land is your personal property. Yellow and red land is off limits, but if it's green then it's fair play. That being said, you can run the very real risk of somebody moving onto the land randomly and destroying your crops. So that's something that you have to keep in mind if you do use green spaces. The town space, however, doesn't have that issue because eventually you can buy the land next to it, so you can grow crops without worrying. But the soil quality isn't great, and it'll be a good while until you can unlock the fertilizer to increase the quality. You also won't be able to get the chicken coop or barn here since it's such a small plot of land. I mean, your house barely fits on it, so what do you expect? I wouldn't say that it's a bad area to start at per se, but it does have its drawbacks. The quality of your crops is directly related to the quality of the soil, so it'll be much harder making money at the start. While you can buy the space of land next to your plot, you'd need to befriend Theodore first for it to become available. and the easiest way to do that is by giving him eggs. So you'll either have to buy a different plot of land to build the coop at first, or buy the eggs from Sky Ranch. Either way, it's pretty inefficient. Moving on, there's the ocean property, which is very spacious. But again, the soil quality here isn't that great. I do like this location because it's right next to the seed shop. It's not called the seed shop. I forgot what it's called. I'm just gonna call it the seed shop, you know? I do like this location because you can buy seeds right next to it, and it's pretty convenient to get to the beach during some festivals. Not to mention that it made it so much easier for me to give gifts to my bae Kurt. I actually did end up relocating to this location later, but I didn't start out the game here because of the soil quality. Which leaves us with the river location. It's a little small and you can't get the Cooper barn here either, but it's super convenient since you're right next to the river and it has good soil quality. My priority starting out was just making money, and the best part about this location is that you can catch fish easily, making it a good source of income while you wait for your crops to grow and a quick way to replenish your stamina, which is a huge issue in this game. Long term, it's not really the best choice, but it doesn't cost that much to buy the other plots of land, so for me it was a good place to start. I actually really like having to weigh the pros and cons of each location and choosing what's best for my own playing style. It wouldn't be the last time that they've used this kind of idea in the series, but honestly I feel like to this day they've yet to utilize this idea to its full extent. Like I said, it's also present in Tree of Tranquility, but I didn't feel like there were any substantial consequences to choosing one plot of land over the other in that game. All of them were located pretty close together, and while the amount of space you had to farm varied for each plot, you had plenty of space for the barn, coop, and your house regardless of which one you chose. If anything, there's even less stakes there than in Magical Melody. The only other game I can think of that sort of tried to make it a thing was Tale of Two Towns on the DS, where you had to choose between land optimized for farm animals or for growing crops. Even though you could own both properties, because they were on completely different sides of the map, it was inconvenient having to travel back and forth between the towns every day, especially if your preferred love interest just so happens to live in the opposite town. Quick travel between the towns only really becomes viable after you complete the game's main story, which can take years in-game. It was a novel idea, but the final product was very clunky. Magical Melody falls into a similar category for me, but we'll get to that later. Once you've chosen where you want your farm and start the game proper, you'll quickly find yourself recruited by the Harvest Sprites to help restore the Harvest Goddess to her original form. She turned herself into stone out of disappointment that the townspeople have forgotten how to be grateful, and even about her own existence. Harvest Moon plots for these games have always been a little bit flimsy, but this one really takes the cake. I really liked collecting the notes as I went about my chores. My first Harvest Moon game was DS Cute, another title where you're tasked with saving the goddess by completing certain tasks throughout the game, so the collecting part of this game is something that I enjoyed a lot, but I honestly can't wrap my head around how collecting the notes actually solves the problem of the townspeople have forgotten how to be grateful, or even the fact that they forgot about her. It really makes me appreciate how Tree of Tranquility and Animal Parade at least tried to incorporate the townspeople into the story. Obviously, it wasn't that well integrated in this title, but I give it some leeway because it did introduce a lot of features that I would end up really liking in future titles. As I'll get into in more detail later, Magical Melody has a lot of great ideas, but the execution wasn't the best. Flimsy plot aside, the actual task of collecting the music notes is very enjoyable in this title. It can sound a little daunting at first, but you don't really need to go out of your way too much. You only need 30 notes to be able to marry someone in town, unless you want to marry Jamie, our quote-unquote rival to save the Harvest Goddess, which, now that I think about it, I don't really understand why we need a rival for that, but I digress. Anywho, Jamie will reject you until you actually save the goddess by collecting 50 notes. And even then you can accomplish that goal by the end of the winter without really trying. Unlike Harvest Moon DS and DSQ, it's not nearly as challenging as it might sound at first. A lot of the notes you get just through your normal daily activities. You also get some from befriending the townspeople and attending festivals. There's no deadline, so unless you're pursuing Jamie, you can really just sit back and enjoy the game without too much pressure. Disclaimer, the game does end when you marry Jamie, so if you're planning to pursue them, just keep that in mind. Learn that one the hard way. Now, whether you can actually enjoy playing the game or not though, it's going to depend on how tolerant you are to how miserable the game feels to actually play. Hold your tomatoes, hear me out. I know a lot of people love this game to bits, and I do see the appeal in what it has to offer. But actually sitting down and playing this game almost broke my sanity. Not as much as A Wonderful Life, which we'll eventually get to someday. Gotta mentally prepare myself for that one. But it's still pretty bad. Magical Melody runs really slow, but I could forgive that if it didn't make the farming itself such a slog. It's been a while since I've played any of the much older Harvest Moon games, so I can't really speak on how quickly your stamina drained in those games, but man is it bad in Magical Melody. You lose stamina for anything. I don't know how many times my character passed out just because I picked something up or tossed an item in a maker. It's absurd. The stamina issue by itself, I can deal with. It was also an issue in Tree of Tranquility, and while it was a bit annoying at first, it quickly stopped mattering as I upgraded my tools. But with Magical Melody, even with the upgraded tools, I still felt like I was constantly struggling to keep myself from passing out, which is why the river location came in so handy for me. I caught a few fish when my stamina was running out, and just had to run inside my house to cook them up so that I could continue with my work. You can fish in a lot of places, so you don't necessarily need to live near the river, but time goes by pretty fast in this game, and it's already hard to finish doing all your chores before nighttime without having to run all over the place all day. The other thing that made things difficult is the amount of inventory slots that you start the game out with. You only have 5 slots when you start the game, so you're gonna have to switch your tools out a lot, and constantly go back and forth in and out of your house until you get the bag upgrade. Thankfully, the first upgrade is only 1,000 gold, but you only get 5 additional slots, and the last upgrade is a bit convoluted to get. First, you need to befriend Alex so that Martha moves into town and shows up at the clinic. And once she shows up, you need to befriend her until she has 2 or 3 hearts before you can activate the event where she tells you to bring her yarn so that she can expand your rucksack. There's literally nothing you can purchase at the clinic, and I wasn't interested in pursuing Alex, so I'd never given him anything up to that point. Needless to say, I was very annoyed by all of these shenanigans. I resorted to looking up how to get this final upgrade because by the fall, I was so frustrated with the game that I was very close to rage quitting entirely. It's not even the lack of inventory space that bothered me. All of the older titles were similarly limited, but that combined with the fact that your character's every move is so agonizingly slow. Every time I had to run back inside to switch my tools or even just take my crops over to the shipping bin, a part of me died inside. The worst part about the size of the rucksack is that none of the items stack except for the seeds, which is useful when you're planting crops, but not when you're harvesting them. I almost lost the will to live in the fall with all of my crops regrowing every other day and having to spend more than half the day running back and forth to the shipping bin. The barn and coop have shipping bins in them, and time doesn't pass indoors, so that was a little bit helpful, but it was still a chore. The issue could have been alleviated somewhat if we had a basket like in the Mineral Town games, but we don't get one in this game. Cool. The icing on the cake though was how awful the tool upgrades are. Don't get me wrong, they did help and I appreciate the fact that they weren't difficult to get. Like Tree of Tranquility, there are 2 ways to upgrade your tools. You can find the ores in the mines and take them to the blacksmith, or you can purchase them at the junk shop. The blacksmith doesn't move into town until you've shipped enough ores from the mines though, and with my stamina I didn't visit the mines often in the first season, so I didn't unlock him for a while. However, making money in this game isn't too difficult, so you can easily purchase the first few upgrades for a reasonable enough price once you've reached the correct level. My main issue with the tool upgrades was honestly how long it takes to power up and use them. It took forever and a day, especially the higher the level of your tool. Some upgrades like the gold watering can for instance were also completely unusable for me. It waters 5 by 5 and you have to be standing in the middle of the crops for it to water around you, even though the previous upgrades watered the squares directly in front of you. And you can't walk through the crops once they grow to a certain stage, so you can't really plant your crops in anything but a 3 by 3 square unless you want to waste seeds, I guess. And if you use it, it's going to miss a ton of your crops. So I had to go back to just watering them 3 by 3. The goddess watering can upgrade is definitely a huge game changer, but you need to fill up the entire experience bar first, a task that takes a tremendous amount of time. I basically spent half of winter standing near my watering well, using the watering can over and over again to fill the gauge. A more dedicated player would have been able to upgrade everything to goddess status before the end of winter, and I did save enough rare ore to do so. But the amount of effort that would have required, yeah, no. The goddess watering can is worth the effort to get, but it still takes forever to charge up. Honestly, I'm so burnt out that I physically cannot continue playing this game. At least not anytime soon. All of the other issues still exist, and there's just nothing left to do that incentivizes me to keep playing. There's 100 notes in total, so you can still keep collecting those as you keep playing, but I'm not a completionist. It's cool. I'm good. Recently, I started up Back to Nature for Girls for no particular reason whatsoever, and the difference in the gameplay is just night and day. It's still pretty clunky, but it doesn't feel nearly as frustrating as Magical Melody, despite sharing some of the same issues and being even more outdated in some aspects. It's not so much a matter of Magical Melody being old as it is an issue of it being really slow. And the lag between your input and the character actually doing things on the screen is unbearable. Moving on from the farming, the animals you can raise are very limited in variety and number. You can only have 1 coop and 1 barn, 8 animals in the upgraded barn, and 5 chickens at most. You can raise cows, sheep, and a horse, and that's about it. Thinking about it now, it's nice that you can buy so many properties in the game, but I honestly don't know what you would even do with so much land when you can't even use it to raise more animals. Just growing a few crops around your house is already exhausting, much less growing things on other properties. You can build more houses, I suppose, but certain things like your cooking utensils are limited to just one house. If I wanted to cook at one location, I'd have to take it from another location. So, for example, after relocating my house to the ocean property, I was still farming over at the river location because I'd yet to ship enough limestone to get fertilizer for my new field. And running to the shipping bin at my house was such a pain that I ended up just building another house exactly where I had my old one. I could have relocated my barn or coop to use a shipping bin in there and taken up less space on the property, but it was still convenient being able to cook sashimi whenever I got low on stamina. So I kept my knives over at the river house, but unfortunately it meant I couldn't have any over at my main house. So if I want to cook any sashimi, I can't go to my actual house to make it. I have to go over to my river house. I guess you can argue that it's good to have multiple homes if you happen to be somewhere far away from your house and want to go home ASAP. But you can literally warp home using the Z button in the menu, so it's not all that useful when you think about it. On that note, do you know how useful fast traveling back home would have been in other games? You don't actually even need to go home in Magical Melody. You can stay up all night and at worst, you'll get teleported home at 6 AM. Just another one of those great ideas Magical Melody has that never gets used again for whatever reason. The fishing in this game is pretty easy compared to other titles. You can see the fish in the water before you cast your fishing rod, and fish will always regenerate in the same spot, so it really doesn't take too long to catch them. I'm not a fishing connoisseur, so I'm cool with anything as long as there isn't a minigame attached. And since time moves quickly, I appreciate how easy it is to catch a few fish and go about my day. That about wraps it up for the general farming mechanics. Let's talk about the mines now. The mines in Magical Melody introduce gas status effects for the first time, something that Tree of Tranquility and Animal Parade players will recognize. There aren't as many negative status effects here aside from static, which will freeze you in place for a short time, and the effect that darkens the screen. Thankfully, there aren't any that drain your stamina, surprisingly enough, but you still need to be alert because items will get sucked into the void if you don't pick them up fast enough after breaking the rocks. I was so incredibly stressed out the first time I went into the mines because I wasn't expecting my items to just disappear in 2.5 seconds. But the mines are pretty generous with the ores and you only need one to upgrade each tool. You can find pretty much every ore that you need up to gold in the lower floors of the mines. Like I literally never went further than maybe floor 15. And since you can find the rare ore in the winter mine, I didn't really feel compelled to explore any deeper than that. There are 100 floors in each mine, and if I'm not mistaken, you can find a power berry at the bottom of at least one of them. But I'm not a completionist, especially not in this game, so yeah, I did not pursue that. Speaking of the power berries, there are 5 in the game and I managed to stumble upon 3 of them. Each power berry increases your stamina by 20%, so if you find all of them, then you'll have twice as much stamina as what you started the game with. Let's explore some of the more mundane aspects of the game now that we've covered the core mechanics. Magical Melody has probably the most festivals out of any farming sim I've ever played. There are typically 4 to 5 festivals per season, 1 per week essentially. You get a note after basically every festival, so it is in your best interest to attend all of them, though I'm not gonna lie, a lot of them are pretty boring and or unmemorable. Most of the time you show up, talk to 3 or 4 people, and then Mayor Theodore declares the festival over. Even the animal festivals end quickly, and the romantic festivals don't fare that much better. There are a few mini games sprinkled in here and there that are actually pretty fun, like the summer festival and the horse race, but that's pretty much it. You can even miss a few festivals if you don't provide the items needed for them. A Wonderful Life only had a handful of festivals, so it is nice to have a lot more to look forward to in this game. But even in older titles like Back to Nature, while the festivals weren't super fleshed out, at least the majority, if not all of the townspeople turned up to participate. During the romantic festivals, you don't actually get to invite who you want to accompany you. You're basically forced to go with whoever has the highest level of affection for you. And if you refuse their invitation, then tough luck. Even if you happen to go with the person you want to go with, you don't get any noticeable raise in their affection for you, and most of the time they say 1 or 2 lines at best before the festival is over. Sometimes you don't even get that. To say that I was underwhelmed by the festivals in this game would be an understatement. Some of them were literally exactly the same, and I feel like maybe they overcompensated a bit for the fact that A Wonderful Life was so barren by taking the quantity over quality approach in this game. Unfortunately, it wasn't limited to just the festivals though. The characters in the game suffer greatly from this. In addition to all the non-romanceable NPCs, Magical Melody sports a whopping 21 romanceable characters, 10 each of men and women, and Jamie, whose gender will be the opposite of whatever you choose for your main character. It's nearly twice as many options as we typically get in farming sims as a whole, and a far cry from the 3 that we got in A Wonderful Life and Another Wonderful Life. Despite being such a diverse group, some of the characters do share similar archetypes. For example, I found myself caught up between Blue and Kurt, both of whom fall into the stoic category. Unlike in previous titles, there aren't any hard events between your character and the romantic love interests, so it's really hard to feel like you're really getting to know any of them in any meaningful way. When you remember that this game came out directly after A Wonderful Life, it really feels like they were determined to make it the complete opposite of that game, for better or for worse. Ultimately, I only decided to marry Kurt because he makes this adorable gremlin face whenever he's flustered. And in this game, that's about as much personality as I can expect from any of these characters. I really wish that I had more to say about them, but this is literally all I've got. There's a nice mini game you can play in order to get the blue feather at the summit of the mountain, which is a nice touch considering that your actual proposal and wedding are so lackluster. Tree of Tranquility had something similar, although I don't think you had to play any mini games to get the feather, and in Animal Parade you have to climb up through the mine before your time limit is up in order to find the bird that leaves the blue feather behind. It's actually said that in future titles you don't really have to do anything special to get the blue feather, so I really do like the way that it was done here, even if it's just a random gimmick. Aside from the marriage candidates, the rest of the townspeople aren't all that interesting. There are a lot that I just did not bother to talk to, ultimately resulting in some of them leaving the town altogether, which sucks actually. I'm really glad that in Tree of Tranquility, when people move onto the island, they stay there regardless of whether you interact with them or not. Some of the love interests do move out if you don't pay any attention to them, so try to figure out who you're going to marry early on so that they don't accidentally leave before you get a chance to pursue them. There are not many cutscenes that you can unlock in the game outside of the introduction cutscenes when you meet someone for the first time. And while there are rival cutscenes you can unlock between some of the characters, they don't actually get married. As I've mentioned in other reviews, the interpersonal relationships in these games do greatly impact my overall enjoyment of them, which is why I can forgive some of the clunkier aspects of games like Animal Parade, but not Magical Melodies. It's hard to give it a final verdict because there are a lot of things I like about it, and some of those things did make it to games that I love dearly, but the final product is lacking in many aspects, and I have a hard time seeing myself ever coming back to this entry, unless it gets a remake, of course. I do think that it was a much needed change after A Wonderful Life, recapturing some of the magic and whimsy that previous entries gave us while also doing its own unique thing in ways that hadn't been seen in the series up until that point. All that being said, I do think that it's a very strong contender for a remake. A lot of my complaints happen to be quality of life issues that if they do fix up in a future remake, that would make the game a lot more playable. The Mineral Town and A Wonderful Life remakes left a lot to be desired, and the Grand Bazaar remake hasn't been released yet as of the recording of this video, so we don't yet know if it will be able to both update the game to modern standards and offer up an enjoyable experience for fans of the original and new players alike. However, I do have a good feeling about it based on everything we've seen so far, and it gives me hope that titles that didn't really get a chance to shine too much previously can get a second chance moving forward. Like most people, my most anticipated remake is Animal Parade, but I do have a soft spot for Magical Melody despite my complaints, and think that it could be a really solid game with quality of life improvements to the gameplay and a massive overhaul on the life sim aspects to it. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you very much for watching, and feel free to check out my previous Harvest Moon reviews. It might take a little while, but I'll be back soon with a review for one of, if not the most beloved entries in the series. So click the subscribe button and the bell if you want to know the moment when that video drops. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and let me know what your thoughts are about Magical Melody in the comments. Until we meet again, farmers, so long, farewell, and I'll see you all again when the stars align.